I'm going to show you just a few excerpts. Check out this extract from Microsoft's submission. Let me read it. The online harms proposal requires regulated service providers to take all reasonable measures, which can include the use of automated systems to identify harmful content that is communicated on its service and make that content inaccessible to persons in Canada. In addition, regulated service providers will be required to independently adjudicate complaints and remove illegal or harmful content within 24 hours from the content being flagged. A failure to comply with these requirements would trigger significant administrative monetary damages. Both of these obligations impinge on fundamental freedoms enshrined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and international human rights law, to the extent that this approach may risk being perceived as a government censorship regime that is outsourced to private companies. Requiring service providers to proactively monitor all user content and to assess the legality or harmfulness of user content is problematic. First, this requirement may have a disproportionate effect on user privacy and may undermine necessary cybersecurity efforts by effectively eliminating the ability to leverage encryption for certain communications. The extraordinary policy implications merit greater public debate. There's a little bit of jargon in there, but I think it's pretty clear. Microsoft is saying, what are you doing? There's no free place in the world that does this. Let me just read a little bit more from Microsoft. I know in some detail, but aren't you surprised? I mean, I think of Microsoft, I think of the detestable Bill Gates, but I guess Microsoft's free speech lawyers really thought this was a problem. Let me read just one more excerpt from their quote. Requiring service providers to adjudicate the legality or harmfulness of content also fails to take into account that service providers are not equipped to make content decisions that require applying legal standards or assessing intent, context, and cultural subjectivities. Making judgments on online speech is often a complex process, requiring subject matter expertise and a careful balancing of rights. Is it now appropriate for service providers to make these decisions? And the challenges, it is not appropriate. And the challenges are exacerbated when legislation requires removal within a short, fixed time period. Legally mandated adjudication and takedown rules incentivize service providers to adopt a conservative approach to content removal, which could lead to the disproportionate removal of legitimate content. This in turn could have unintended negative consequences for freedom of expression and risks creating a chilling effect on online speech, free and open public discourse, and civil society participation. Can you even believe it? Big tech is arguing against the criminalization of speech, saying it doesn't want Trudeau to outsource censorship to them. Here's an extract. I'm just picking because there's so many in there. Pinterest. Do you know that? Have you heard of that website? Pinterest. It's like little fun pictures that you like pin to the bullet. I'm just going to read a little bit from Pinterest. They got something to say. Let me quote a little bit. Pinterest is not a place for politics, and we are not focused on fostering free expression. However, several provisions of the proposed law may have implications for the rights and interests of law-abiding internet users, which we think deserves more discussion. The requirement to take down unlawful content on 24 hours notice, for example, will provide many small and medium-sized platforms with little time to assess potentially complex legal claims. The strong incentive will be to simply take down any content that is alleged to violate the law in order to avoid legal risk. Platform companies of all sizes regularly receive abusive or mistaken demands to remove lawful and even societally important content. At Pinterest, we do our best to identify and resist such improper requests, but the largest companies will be uniquely positioned to carry out the kind of rapid yet accurate legal analysis in the proposed law suggests. Similarly, the requirement that platforms take all reasonable measures, which can include the use of automated systems to identify harmful content, may, in practice, incentivize smaller platforms to rely on imprecise filtering tools. Legal mandates to adopt poorly defined or understood automated systems create serious risk of harm to users. I hope I'm not boring you with these. I'm trying to show you that these companies that actually have to apply the censorship see a lot of practical problems and moral problems too. Now, there's a ton like that. Let me close with Twitter's official statement. I'm a Twitter user. I think Twitter is what Trudeau really hates the most. Issue 24-hour takedown requirements. Twitter opposes the recommendation of a time limit on addressing any content flagged by any person in Canada as harmful content. The proposed time limit does not allow for judicious, thoughtful analysis in a manner that balances the right to freedom of expression in Canada with the right to freedom from discrimination and prejudice. According to existing research and analyses, the proposed system has a high probability of negatively impacting marginalized, racialized, and intersectional groups. More information from Professor Susie Dunn at Dalhousie University can be found here. The 24-hour proposal should be abandoned. Content should be addressed as quickly as possible and within the scope of existing Canadian jurisprudence, terms of service, and rules by the online communications service providers. Here's an interesting one. Any standard applied in the digital world should also be applied in real life. For example, law enforcement should be required to both launch an investigation within 24 hours of flagging, as well as remove any hateful content, graffiti on a statue, for example, that appears within 24 hours across the country. That's amazing. It's a great point. Why should a private company have to jump into action within 24 hours? When's the last time police responded to a graffiti within 24 hours? That's a great point. Is Twitter actually comparing Trudeau's proposal to how China operates? Issue, website blocking. The proposal by the Government of Canada to allow the Digital Safety Commissioner, I love that title, to block websites is drastic. People around the world are being blocked from accessing Twitter and other services in a similar manner as the one proposed by Canada by multiple authoritarian governments, China, North Korea, and Iran, for example, under the false guise of online safety, impeding people's rights to access information online. Look, I've just started to skim this 1,200-page access to information that Professor Geist received. The entire world sees Trudeau for who he is, a wannabe dictator. The only difference amongst the serious criticisms that I've shown you is how diplomatic they are at describing him. The battle is still on. Trudeau hates independent media. He hates the fact that you're allowed to disagree with him. He thinks if you have a different point of view, you're engaging in discrimination or disinformation, if not a crime. Remember what he said to our reporter, Tamara Uglini. I'm pessimistic, but I'm hopeful. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.